Long ago, on the Isle of Unst, there lived a young man, a farmer, and one summer evening he was down walking by the shore. He had come down there to cool off after a long day in the hay fields, and there was a breeze blowing off the ocean, and he could see the full moon in the sky. And below, the sands were shining golden in the moonlight. He walked along, and he looked up, and there, right in front of him, was a ring of fairy people, dancing in a great circle and singing. He had never seen them like this before, but because it was midsummer and a full moon, there they were, without their sealskins, dancing for joy. The young man moved quietly along the shore, and he saw his shadow moving before him. He could see that not one of the fairy people cast a shadow on the ground. His own shadow moved before him and entered the ring before he did. The fairy people in an instant broke the circle and ran for their sealskins, and soon the air was full of the sounds of soft splashing and their cries as they ran for their sealskins and dove into the water. But there was one of the fairy people, a young woman, running back and forth along the shore, looking as if she had lost something. She ran to the edge. With her feet in the foam, she called out to her people to come for her, but it was too late. They were already gone. The young man looked down in his shadow. He saw a darker shape. It was her sealskin. And so he picked that up and he hid it behind a rock. And he walked down to the edge of the water, and there he looked at the young woman and he said, "Woman of the sea, why are you crying?" She looked at him, and for a moment he thought she might dive right into the water, but instead she took a step closer to him. Sir, give it back to me. If you give it back, my people and I will give you the treasure of the sea." "Oh, I want no treasure of the sea except for you," he said. "I want you to be my wife. It is by your own hearth that you shall sit on those long, cold, dreary winter nights. Never again will you have to swim in that cold, gray sea." And she tried to explain to him. She tried to explain about those fairy places, deep, deep in the sea, where the water is as warm as a river in summer, where neither snow nor darkness ever come. But he wouldn't hear her. He wrapped her in his cloak. He carried her on his shoulder straight to the priest's house, and there they were married. He carried her crying all the way to his house. He brought her straight into the kitchen and set her right before the hearth. She took one look at that glowing crimson peat in the fireplace, and her eyes were transfixed, and she stopped crying. It was the first thing that made her forget for even a moment the sea that was her home. She never lost her wonder of it. In fact, she brought each of her 3 children to see it the first thing after they were born. She was with the man for 14 years, and she was a good wife to him. She baked his bread, she spun the wool of his Shetland sheep, and she loved her children. And he loved her. He never once named the sealskin to her, and she never named it to him. He did see one day, as he was ploughing on the headland above the bay, her standing out on the rocks, the waves crashing around, and she crying, sobbing, to a great gray seal out in the water. But he didn't say anything when he got home that night. You see, he didn't wonder that she should miss the company of her own people. And then one September evening, the air was warm and yellow with the dusk. The children were out running among the haystacks, and their voices were carried into the kitchen where the woman was baking the bread. Then their voices changed. She heard them shrieking and yelling, and she ran out to see what it was. They came running up to her. They grabbed her hands. "Oh, you must come and see it," they said. "It's like a cat. Oh, it's much softer than a cat, and larger, too." And they pulled her into the barn, and there, under last year's hay, was buried her sealskin. The children ran off back outside, and she could hear them playing among the haystacks, their voices twittering like little birds. She could hear the sounds of the swallows as they settled down under the eaves for the night. The chickens were already in their roosts, and now and then one of them shifted, and she could smell that bread baking in the kitchen. And so she turned and walked back toward the door to go into the house. And then the wind came, wriggling around the haystacks, carrying on it a sound she had heard so many times. She never seemed to hear it at all. It was the sound of the sea, the great waves crashing far out on the rocks, the little waves racing up on the shore and slipping back. And in an instant she had grabbed up her sealskin and was running down the track toward the shore as fast as she could go, and her children were calling after her, and she didn't even hear them. Not long after this, the man returned from the hayfields, and the children excitedly told him all that had happened, and in the next instant he too was running down that track to the shore as fast as he could go, and he got to the edge of the water just in time to see his wife far out in the sea with that great gray seal beside her, and he called to her to stop, to come back. And the woman turned and looked at the man, and she said, "My heart has always been in the sea." And then she dove down into the ocean, and the great gray seal with her, down deep into those fairy places. The man waited a long, long time for his wife to come back. The villagers tell stories of seeing her children walking along the shore and out in the water, following along, barking at them and tossing them jellyfish and pretty shells and other good things to eat. They've seen a seal. But their mother never did come back to the land, ever.